Hi, I'm Wanda from Alanda Craft, and today I'm going to show you how to make this Quilt-As-You-Go quilt with sashing. Now the beauty of this is once you've finished it, it's fully quilted. You don't have to do anything further. It's also fully reversible. So you can turn it over and you've got a different look on the back. As you can see here, because we've reversed our colours. So let's get on and show you how to make this now. So what we need are some squares that measure 10.5 by 10.5 inches. So I have one fabric here and I have 20 of those. Then in a contrasting fabric I have another 20 squares, and then I have 20 squares of batting. Now I also have some sashing cut, and I've cut this already because I know that I'm going to trim my squares down to 10 inches. So I have some 2 inch by 10 inch and some 1 inch by 10 inch. Pieces for the sashing. Also have some other sashing cut here and some border pieces, but we'll talk about them later. Now don't worry if you don't get all of these measurements now, because they'll all be on the Alanda Craft website, so that's www.alandacraft.com. So let's get on and show you what to do. So now what we want to do is create a sandwich, and to do that we take one piece of fabric, a piece of batting, and then a piece of contrasting fabric on the top, and just make sure that's all lined up and nice and smooth. Okay, now if you want to, you can quilt this as you wish now, but I'm going to take you through our method of doing this. So what we've done is we take the top piece of fabric and draw some lines on it. Now just line it up quickly on the board so that it's approximately 1/4 of an inch over on these sides here at the top and the bottom. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I take my ruler and I line it up on the middle line here, and I draw a line. And that's the middle line, this line on my mat. So I just put my ruler along that line. Then I move it out an inch to the next line and draw another line. Now I'm using a friction pen. Don't use a ballpoint. You can use chalk, tailor's chalk, but friction pens are great because once you're finished you iron them and the lines come off. Now keep doing that until I get to the end. And don't worry about this end bit here, because that's going to be trimmed off. And then we come back and just do the same on the other end, put it against there, the line on the inch, and then come across, and again we don't need one on this end. Now once I've got my lines drawn, I generally go through and do the whole stack, but then we put our pieces together in our sandwich. So we have our dark piece and our batting, and then I pin them all together. So then it's just a matter of going to the machine and sewing down those lines. And because the lines are there, it's really quick and easy to do. So start it in the middle, come down, come right off the end, then come along and go back the other way, and just keep doing that. Just run off the end and come on and do the next line. When you get to this line here, just cut it off, and then come and start at this end. And what you'll end up with is a piece that looks like this. So you can see all my lines here. It's just waiting to be ironed to take those friction marks off. And there you are, it's also quilted on the back. So I finished quilting my blocks and I've given them a press, and now it's time to cut them to size, and I'm going to cut them to 10 inches square. Now I'm going to show you two ways to do this. If you have one of these square rulers, we'll go through that method first, and if you don't have one of these square rulers, you can use your ordinary long ruler here. So I'll show you both of those methods now. Right, so the first thing we want to do is lay our block down, and we want it so that the lines are running away from us. Now I'm going to lay the 5-inch mark on this ruler onto the middle line of my block. Okay, now hold that in place, and I'm going to trim this edge. Now I'm going to turn the block around so I still have the lines running up and down away from me, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to put the 5-inch mark on that centre line, and I'm going to trim this edge. Now, turn the block around once, and I'm going to lay this down. Now I just want a straight line along the bottom here. Now I know that's straight because I've just cut it. It can be any of the lines on your ruler. And I want to bring it in though, so that this 10-inch line here is in from the edge. So I don't want that to be right against the edge at this stage. I want to leave a little bit of room there for trimming in a moment. Okay, make sure that the line that I've got here selected is straight, and it is, so we'll just go and cut this edge. And again, we're going to turn the block around. Now this time, I'm actually going to place the 10-inch line along that cut edge and along the bottom here. Okay, so we've got that in place. And there you have it, a 10-inch block. And you can check that by going to your mat and just laying your block down there, and you can see, yes, it's 10 inches there and 10 inches here. So now I'm going to show you how to trim up your block with just using your ordinary ruler. So again, I'm going to have the 5-inch mark on my ruler running down the centre line that I have for my quilt. And I'm going to trim the edge. Okay, turn the block right around so I still have these lines running away from me. Again, placing my 5-inch line down that middle quilted line and trim the edge. Now, for the next bit, because this isn't a 10-inch ruler, I'm just going to turn the block so that the lines are running horizontally now and line it up along here. Now I'm just going to leave it a bit of an overhang here, so I'm not putting it directly on that first line, and then I will trim it on the 10-inch. Okay, just place my ruler along here, and I'm lining up with the 10-inch line on the mat. I'll turn it round. Now this time I'm going to line these lines of my block up with the lines. Okay, so we're all good there. It's along the bottom line, along this line here, and place this on the 10-inch line. And give it a trim. So there you are. It's making a 10-inch block using your regular ruler. So now that I've trimmed up my blocks, it's time to lay them out, and as you can see I have the patterns alternating. Now I've run the lines on my black blocks vertically and the ones on my red blocks are running horizontally, and I've alternated my blocks in that pattern, in that manner. So now it's time to add our sashing. So what we do is we need 15 of these strips. We've got 15 1-inch strips and we've got 15 2-inch strips. You take your 2-inch strip and you actually fold it in half and press it. Now we're not adding any sashing to the first block, so just ignore those. We'll start from the second block in and we work over to the last block. So we pick up our block, making sure that we keep it how we're going to want it to look, and we take a 1-inch strip and we lay that along the back. Okay, so our 1-inch strips always go along the back, and we take our 2-inch strip that's been pressed in half and we place that along the front like that. Now I suggest you pin. A lot of people don't pin, but I suggest you do. It keeps everything nice and neat. So what I do is I take these, line them all up nicely and pop in a pin, and then I just go down to the other end and do the same thing again, line them all up nicely, pop in a pin. Now give the two ends a little tuck so everything sits nice and neat and flat, and pin again in the middle. Now what we're going to do, once we've gone through and we've pinned all of these, now remembering the 1-inch strip goes on the back and the 2-inch strip goes on the front. Now you want the raw edges, excuse me, the raw edges of your 2-inch strip go towards the outer edge. The folded piece goes towards the inner edge. So just make sure that you have that folded piece coming this way, not on the edge. Now when we've got them all pinned, we'll go and we'll sew with a 1/4-inch seam all the way down there on each block. So I've added my sashing pieces to all of my blocks now, and now it's time to start joining the rows together. So we'll start with our end block, which didn't have any sashing attached to it, and what I'm going to do is the second block in, I'm just going to pull up the sashing, the 1-inch sashing on the back, and pull up this block here, and then I'll just match those along and pin them. So I'll just show that again. Okay, so we're picking this up and we're taking the 1-inch block that was on the back and we're bringing up this end, the back edge of that block. And what we can do to make it easier is simply push them together like that. Okay, so now we need to pin. So what I'll do is that match them up and push the seam back as far as I can, and then pop a pin in and put the pin over that to hold it in place. And I'll just do that all the way along. So I've got one pinned here, so I'll just show you that. So you can see here, so it's all pinned to the other block, and I've got the seam out of the way. Now what we'll do now is we'll go and we'll sew with a 1/4 inch seam all the way along here, taking our pins out as we go. And what we'll end up with is our blocks will look like this. So these are the blocks joined. Now you can see here our 1/4 inch seams sit nicely together, they don't overlap. So that's going to give us some nice bulk behind this binding here. Now on the back you can see that that's nice and neat and all finished off. Now you're going to want to put your bobbin the same colour as this red square or whatever square you have, because when we push this piece of binding here over, remember this was the folded edge, so it's all nice and neat, we push it over to cover those seams, and we're going to sew down here. We're going to top stitch this down, and it's because it's quite a bit bigger, it's going to actually sew on that second block, so you'll want your bobbin to match that block. So I've sewn all my blocks into rows, and you can see here I've joined them with the sashing. Now I've got 5 of these done because my quilt is 4 by 5. And now it's time to add our long pieces of sashing, so we want to join our rows. And as you can see in the quilt behind me, these are the ones that we'll be adding, these long rows here, and I have 6 of those to add. So I've cut my sashing strips. I've cut the 1 inch strips by 40 inches. I've also cut my 2 inch strips by 40 inches, and that's because when we add the sashing between the blocks, it doesn't actually add anything to the row, so the row still remains 40 inches. So what we need to do is take our 2 inch strips as we did before, fold them in half and give them a good press, and then just as we did when we put the blocks together, we put our 1 inch strip on the back and we put our 2 inch strip with the raw edges to the outer edge on the front, and then give it a good pin, and we're going to sew along there with a 1/4 inch seam. So we need to be adding these strips to the bottom of every row. Now except for the first row. With the first row what we want to do is we want to add one lot of sashing to the top and one to the bottom, and then we just add to the bottom of each of these rows. So now we're going to sew our rows together, so we're going to join them with the sashing, and it's just the same as we did our blocks, but this is how we go. Now we lift up the back piece, which is the 1 inch strip, and we put the back piece of our next row, we place those together. And remember, we just flip those down like that to make it easier to pin. Just lay it all out, just bring that 1 inch piece out. Now we have something a little extra to do this time. We need to match these sashing strips because we want them to line up and be nice and neat. So just roll that back, and you can see there that that's a line there. So you may have to juggle this around a little bit once you pin it, but that's okay. So just lay it down. And I'm going to pin those pieces first so I can make any adjustments I need to make, and then I'll just pin the rest of it. I'll come along here and do exactly the same, so pulling up that back piece of sashing and just kind of eyeballing along here. That looks like it's going to join up, and pop a pin. And then to check it, of course, that it's going to be matching, you can just flip it over like this, and you can see that's pretty good. So you'll do that with the other one as well. Then go ahead and pin all the rest of that sashing on, and then we'll just sew it together, and we'll sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. Alright, so I've sewn all the rows together now, and what you're left with is this piece here, which is not finished, and we need to do that. So what you do is just fold it up and over those raw edges, and then pin it in place and top stitch along here as close to the edge as you can. And I've already done that with the rest of the rows. You can see here that I've sewn and top stitched this piece of sashing in place. So now it's time to get on. I'll just go and finish that and then we'll do our borders. So now that we have the centre of our quilt done, it's time to start adding our borders. So we're going to firstly add the top and the bottom border. So we cut our pieces at 40 inches. So that's our top piece, our batting and our contrasting piece. So they are all cut at 40 inches. Now I'm cut them at 6.5 inches and I'm doing a very open quilting design. As you can see here, I've done this curvy line and I've done it using my Leaves Galore ruler, which is absolutely fabulous, and we're just playing with this at the moment, but it's a lot of fun, and so we've used it to do this design on here. Now if you're going to be doing something that's a little more fussy and going to pull your borders in a bit, you might want to cut your borders a bit long, a bit wider and a bit longer to allow for that, and then trim them down to the 40 inches after, the 40 inches by 6.5. But that's entirely up to you. We're doing an open border, so we've cut our borders exactly. So as I say, we've got the top and the bottom. I've drawn the lines on here and I just followed them down, all down one way, and then when I got to the end I just turned around and came back, and that's the result. Now if you don't have a ruler that creates curves for you, what you can do with this is simply draw your lines. You can make them 1 inch or 1.5 inches, whatever you feel like, but just draw the lines all the way down on your fabric and then sew down those lines, going to the end, turning around, coming back, and that will also give you a nice effect. So I've done my quilting on my border piece, and now it's time to attach it to the quilt. So you need to at this point decide which piece you want showing up. Now remember, the front of our quilt is the one where we did the top stitching on the sashing. So I've looked at this and I've decided I'm going to go with the black, so I'll turn that over. But remember, this is a fully reversible quilt, so you'll still get a nice effect of the red on the back. And now we're going to attach our border to our quilt exactly as we've done all of the other blocks and rows. So we take our 1 inch piece, just pull it up and then pin it along the wrong side, or what we're calling the wrong side of the quilt, of the border. And then I'm just going to pin that along there. Alright, I'll pin it all the way along and then I'll sew it with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so I've added my borders to the top and the bottom of the quilt, and you can see that here. So the next thing I'm going to do is add my sashing strips to the sides, and once I've done that I can attach my side borders. Now the side borders are cut at 50 inches. I'll just tell you, the sashing pieces are cut at 63. Don't worry about the measurements though, they will be all on the website. Okay, so the border piece, cut the main piece and the backing piece and the batting at 50 inches, and then we've added a 6.5 inch square to each end, and that brings that to a total of 63 inches. Now we've done the sashing the same as we did on the blocks. I've done the curves the same as we did on the top border, and on the cornerstones I've just done linear stitching the same as we did on all the blocks. So I'll go and attach those now to the sides, and then we're nearly finished. Okay, so as you can see I now have the borders on, so all that's left now for me is to add the binding. Now I'm not going to show you how to do the binding because we have a video on that and I'll put a link in the description below. So all that remains is for me to add the binding, so I'll go and do that now and show you what it looks like when it's finished. So there you have it, our quilt is all finished. I've put the binding on and finished it off, and I think it looks awesome. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, and you can follow us on Facebook and Pinterest. And also, don't forget, the instructions will be over on the website.